Hello and welcome to Run Testers. My name's Nick, and in this video we're going to be comparing the Nike Alphafly 3 and the Nike Vaporfly 3. So the Alphafly 3 and the Vaporfly 3, I would argue, are probably the two best racing shoes on the market. There's a lot to argue about there. There's lots of other great racing shoes, but I do think they're worth comparing as they have a lot of similarities. Obviously, as they use a lot of the same Nike materials, but there are obviously some differences too. One of the differences is the price. The Alphafly is much more expensive. It's £285 or $285, whereas the Vaporfly is £235 or $250. They both have an 8mm drop and a stack height that goes up to that 40mm limit at the heel. The Alphafly is a slightly heavier shoe. It's 220 grams or 7.7 ounces in my UK size 9, whereas the Vaporfly is 206 grams or 7.3 ounces. So the main difference between the two shoes is found in the midsole. In the Vaporfly, you've got a full ZoomX foam midsole, which is Nike's PEBA-based foam with the carbon fly plate running through it, whereas on the Alphafly, you've got ZoomX and the fly plate, but also the Air Zoom pods under the forefoot, which Nike say deliver a little bit more energy return than the ZoomX foam alone. The Alphafly also has a slightly wider plate on the medial side to add a bit of stability. In general, it's a slightly wider shoe than the Vaporfly all round, I would say. The Alphafly has a much bigger cutout on the underside of the shoe as well, which reduces weight, but it's not the segmented cutout that it used to have basically on the Alphafly 1 and 2, which almost separated the rear foam from the front of the shoe. Now got a continuous midsole, which creates a more similar feeling to what you have with the Vaporfly, which has always had that continuous midsole. You've got minimal outsoles on both shoes, but I'd say that the rubber on the Alphafly seems a bit thicker and hardier than the stuff on the Vaporfly, which really has worn quickly at the back of the shoe, as you can see there. Then you've got an Atom Knit 3.0 upper on the Alphafly and a Fly Knit mesh upper on the Vaporfly. Both are very lightweight and breathable and have the same excellent knobbled laces that create a very secure lace tie on both shoes, which is obviously great for racing shoes. With the Alphafly, you obviously have the booty style fit, whereas the Vaporfly you have a tongue. You've got a slightly different heel design on the shoes, with the Alphafly heel coming up a bit higher and having more general padding to hold the heel in place, whereas the Vaporfly has a strip of padding which locks around the back of the Achilles there and can be a little bit more irritating, I found, than the heel design on the Alphafly. I've had to heel lock the Vaporfly, and even so it's a bit more annoying at the back of my foot there compared to the design of the Alphafly. So for me, the fit is good in both shoes in my normal running shoe size. These are both UK 9s. That is the size I have across Nike's range and most shoes. It's a US 10. Got a good amount of room in the toe box to go even on very long runs. The mid-foot hold is good in both shoes. And the heel hold is secure enough, I'd say, once I've heel locked the Vaporfly. It's very good on the Alphafly. I've had no concerns with that at all. With the Vaporfly, I've had to heel lock it, which makes it a bit more of a faff to get on and off, actually, than even the booty style Alphafly. But overall, I would say stick to your normal running shoe size with both of these shoes. The fit has been very good for me. So I've logged a lot of miles and raced a couple of times at least in both of these shoes, and I do really like them both. Like, if you've seen our full reviews or any other comparison videos on the channel, you'll know that I do think these are both excellent racing shoes, and I would probably have them at 1 and 2 overall in the racing shoe world at the moment. I'd say these two shoes are certainly closer in feel than we had with the Vaporfly 2 and the Alphafly 2, which were very different. The Vaporfly 2 was a bit firmer, more aggressive, felt like a much racier shoe than the Alphafly, which had a very bouncy midsole, a segmented design. It was a lot heavier, but it really did deliver the goods in terms of that propulsive feel. And then with the third generation of the shoes, they have come close together. The Alphafly is a lot lighter. You've got the continuous midsole. You've got more of that tippy forward feeling you associate with maybe more with the Vaporfly. Vaporfly's just got that little bit softer and cushier with the Vaporfly 3. For me, it still feels nice and aggressive. I know some people still prefer the feel of the Vaporfly 2 because it is that tad more aggressive, but I think it's still a fantastic racing shoe for any distance, and it now just has that little bit of extra cush for the longer distances. I'd say the main differences I've noticed when running with these shoes is that the Air Zoom pods in the Alphafly 3 are very noticeable. Like, when I was running in both shoes at the same time, and when I did a session with using the Alphafly after the Vaporfly, which we'll talk about a bit later, you get quite a similar ride. The back of the shoe, I'd say, really does tip you forward very well on both shoes, and then the firmer, slightly more propulsive feel of the AirPods really comes into play. And it's certainly noticeable when running either with both shoes on at the same time or when running them kind of back to back doing hard intervals. The Air Zoom pods, I'd say, are the biggest difference between the two shoes. Vaporfly, though, also does have that slightly lighter, nimbler feel to it, which I think comes into play more late on in races. So I've talked about it in the Alphafly 3 review recently. Like, I've loved doing 5k and 10k races in this shoe. Really good at hitting a fast pace, and in the first half of the race, it feels absolutely fantastic. Cruising along, bouncing along in the shoe, which is that great combination of propulsive but cushioned and bouncy and still very aggressive and all that. Then the second half of races, where I am someone who tries to increase my cadence really to kind of maintain my pace or try and speed up. I'm a very shuffly runner. The Alphafly still feels really good, but it's probably a little bit harder to engage the plate in it when running in that way than the Vaporfly, which is a little bit lighter and feels like it's easier to push through the foam and get the nice propulsive feel from the plate. With the Alphafly, if you're bounding along a bit more or cruising along a bit more, you can definitely feel the plate and the pods all combine to deliver that propulsive ride. And then as maybe you shorten your stride a bit, shuffle along a little bit more, you don't maybe get as much back from the shoe as you did earlier on in exactly the same race. That's how I kind of found it, really. It still felt great at the back end of those races, and I could still hold a fast pace in the 10k I did, for example, but I did feel like I wasn't getting quite the bouncy feeling that I was from the shoe at the start of the race. Whereas Vaporfly, I think, feels a bit more consistent through races in terms of how easy it is to keep turning it over, I think. That's really for shorter race paces, though, I'd say, and as a shuffly runner like myself. If you're a bounding runner, I think you're going to feel like that Alphafly propulsion throughout any kind of race. And then over longer distances, I think the Alphafly is a shoe where it's a bit easier to lock into a pace and just hold it. And that's what really I would look for in a marathon shoe, and both of these are excellent at it. But the Alphafly feels, yeah, if you do hit that pace, it can help you cruise along and hold that pace deep through the races. So like I have run a marathon in the Vaporfly, and it's also very good for that, but that's one area I think the Alphafly will shine a little bit brighter. Another difference is the outsole. Like the Vaporfly outsole is not really looking good on durability, especially the stuff at the back here. Exposed foam on the shoe also cuts up quite quickly. It's not like the Alphafly is loads and loads of rubber, but it does seem to be holding up a little bit better. It's a bit thicker, a bit harder, so you might get a little bit more durability out of the Alphafly, which might help offset the higher cost of the shoe. That said, I have done over 100 miles in this Vaporfly, and the outsole isn't that bad, and it's not really getting significantly worse after that initial sign of wear and tear, and the bouncy feeling is certainly still there. So certainly love them both in all my general testing, and then earlier this week I went out and did a session using them both kind of back to back to get a more direct comparison. Morning from breezy Gunpowder Park in North London. I'm going to do an interval session today using both the Vaporfly 3 and the Alphafly 3. Session's a simple one. It's 2 times 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 minutes on, with a minute off in between each of those, and then 3 minutes between sets. Tossed a coin, and the Vaporfly is the shoe for the first set, and then I'll dash to my car in the rest I have in between, change shoes, and head out in the Alphafly for the second set. We're running mostly the field today, just trying to get a good hard session into the legs, turning over some faster paces, especially in the shorter reps. All finished now, nice controlled session there, kept all the reps under 320 per k pace, pleased with that, sped up a bit on the shorter ones. All felt fairly controlled there on a blustery day. Snap verdict, I'd probably give it to the Alphafly just. I'd say the shoes do feel pretty similar, got that very similar tippy forward aggressive feeling, but the AirPods are very present today. Like when I started to run hard, you could really feel the impact of them just giving a little bit more back under the forefoot. I'd say caveat there on this, obviously in this particular workout, is that I did feel quite controlled throughout, like I was running the pace as well. Alphafly also wore in the second half, so if you run a workout where you feel strong throughout, you always kind of give the edge to the shoe in the second half because you were feeling good then, whereas obviously the Vaporfly was maybe trying to be a bit more controlled, a bit more wary of the extra reps to come, but in both of them I felt really good. Do feel like those AirPods do make that a little bit of a difference now, and they're a bit more noticeable now, the difference between two shoes, because in the past there was a lot of other things going on with the Alphafly that made it feel a bit different to the Vaporfly, the larger disconnected midsole, whereas now the shoes I think have quite a similar feeling, apart from those AirPods, which then give you that little bit of extra firmness and pop under the forefoot. And I didn't really notice the extra weight or anything like that today because, like I say, everything was quite controlled. Alright, a little section here for the people who really love all the stats you get from watches these days, so you can skip this if you want to go straight to the verdict, but if you want to dive into some of the stats from the session, I'm going to throw them all up on screen here. So I thought it'd be fun to look at the stats I recorded in terms of my running style and the general pace and heart rate stats recorded in each shoe for each of the reps, going from 5 minutes down to 1 minute. Now, some obvious caveats here that ruin a direct comparison a little bit. One is that it was a windy day, so on some reps I've been running with the wind and some against the wind. I think one of the Alphafly reps, maybe the 3 minute rep in particular, I had a really good section, long stint with the wind. It's also the fact I'm using a watch, the Garmin Epix Pro, to record these stats. How accurate is that on things like vertical oscillation and ground contact time when you're comparing very small differences? I'm not sure I'd 100% rely on it. And then obviously there is the nature of a session like that I was probably a little bit more cautious perhaps early on with the Vaporfly sets. And although I ran controlled throughout the run, so the stats should be quite comparable in the fact I wasn't really dying in the second half of the workout, I was able to let loose a little bit more towards the end of the workout in the Alphafly over the last couple of reps, knowing that I was about to be finished, which is pretty standard stuff for a session. That first few reps, you're just going to make sure you're controlling yourself so you don't feel too knackered at the end. Before we look at this, my perceptions would be that I have a slightly higher cadence maybe in the Vaporfly, but a slightly longer stride length in the Alphafly, things like that. That wasn't really borne out by the stats at all. They are very similar really across the board, but actually my cadence was slightly higher on the Alphafly reps in general. Stride length was very similar, as was vertical oscillation. marathon. The ground contact time actually was noticeably slightly lower across the board in the Alphafly, a consistent difference between the two shoes, but again, very small differences here. So probably the main takeaway would be that the shoe is not really the key determining factor in all these stats. It's very much the runner. I run the same way, more or less, in both shoes, but it is interesting to me that my perception would be that I maybe bound and get a slightly longer stride from the Alphafly and turn my feet over a little bit more slowly, and that actually really wasn't the case. My cadence was, if anything, slightly higher in the Alphafly, and actually the overall stats were very similar across both shoes. But hey, there's a load of stats on screen. I thought you might like to have a look at those. So the verdict is that these are both absolutely excellent shoes, and I'd be very happy to just have either one of them for all my races, any distance. I think they're both great from 5k to the marathon or beyond if you're looking at those ultra marathons as well. But if I'm going to pick between them, I'd say there's nothing between them for shorter races up to half marathon distance, and then for the marathon I'd probably just lean towards the Alphafly. Vaporfly still an excellent marathon shoe. Both of them are great for all those short distance races, but do think the Alphafly will be the shoe I would use for my next big target marathon, London next year. I think just because of the way it feels so good at holding a pace. Like, I think the Vaporfly is great for that, and it's really easy to accelerate in the Vaporfly, and you do hold the pace naturally, but I think like it just feels easier slightly to hold a pace in the Alphafly, and that's what I'd be looking for a marathon, where for most of the race you feel pretty good, you're locked in, you just want to get through it with as little damage to yourself as possible while holding your target race pace. I think the Alphafly is the best shoe in the world for that. You have got to pay a little bit more for the Alphafly, and really looking at value alone, probably the Vaporfly is the better pick, even with those slight durability concerns. So if that's what you are looking at, I would go and buy the Vaporfly and have no real concerns. I think it's a brilliant racing shoe and very nearly as good for the Alphafly for the marathon. You know, it's very minimal between them whilst being just as good for shorter races and that little bit cheaper. But yeah, overall I'd just give the edge to the Alphafly, I'd say. Okie dokie, that's a comparison of the Nike Alphafly 3 and Vaporfly 3. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Please do like and subscribe, ring the little bell, and we'll see you next time on the channel.